recording. Hi SCA students. I love you and I miss you and I think about you often. I really do. It's crazy for me to see pictures of you off in college or, all dressed up for prom. Sorry, that might be sensitive. I know there was no prom this year probably. But instead of a bunch of goofy teenagers, you guys are growing up into goofy young men and women, and that's really neat for me to see. I live in New Mexico now. I'm in Albuquerque. It's a great city. I love it. I'm wearing my Lobos Wolves University of New Mexico t-shirt, and it's a beautiful day. One of my kids should be napping, and the other, well, we'll see, huh? Anyways, I have some confessions. I have some stories that I really want to share with you guys. I wish I had shared them when I was with you in person, but I didn't really know that these were stories that I needed to tell. So I'm telling you now. And what I would love for you to do, I would love, I want to ask you, as somebody who introduced you to the wonders of Senor Woolley, as the person who put on fashion shows for you, and, I was Profe, right? I just want to ask you, because it's me, right? And you know that I love you, to listen to me. Listen to my story. Let me say it all, okay? Listen all the way to the end. Even when you're like, oh my gosh, it's Profe doing that thing again. Like, oh brother, I am not so sure about this right now. Just, give me like a virtual pinky swear. Just hear me out, okay? I have a story to tell today, and I have another story that I want to tell tomorrow, and another story for the day after that. And so just 3, it's not so bad, right? But that's my plan, okay? And so here we go. My first story that I really want to share with you is from my time teaching in Philadelphia. When I was 22, I was right out of college, and I didn't know anything. I didn't even know that I liked teaching or kids. I just sort of had this job, this opportunity was just plopped in my lap by God. God was so gracious to me, because I didn't think I wanted to teach, and he was like, no, trust me, you're gonna like it. You should do this. So I got this job teaching, and I was teaching a class of mostly kids who were Asian, Cambodian. And I had this one student, and this one student was named Jonathan. Definitely not his real name. I'm making these up because I've got to protect these kids' privacy. Actually, they're like 22 now, so. The same age I was. Okay, sorry. So Jonathan, he was a kid who was just dealing with a lot, right? Going through a lot of things in his mind and his heart. And some of those things were, just tough. And Jonathan also struggled with school. It did not come naturally. And also struggled with kind of healthy ways of expressing frustration and anger. So you can see how this would go down in school, right? Like if Jonathan didn't have his homework for the day and I gave him a look and was like, oh, you should do your homework. I remember one time he slammed his books down violently on the desk and kicked his backpack out of the way and, sat down and said, yeah, I don't have it, and I don't care. Very, loud, aggressive, disruptive. And I remember just, my heart being filled with, you know what? This poor kid. So I remember saying, hey, come with me outside. We're going to talk, okay? We're going to talk. You're upset? Let's go outside. Left the other kids reading, hopefully. They were reading. And just sat down and was like, hey, man, what's going on? Like, are you okay? Can you tell me what's happening? And I find out that this kid hasn't had breakfast and everything was going wrong at home the night before. And I did this often with Jonathan when he was angry and disruptive and just kind of defiant or non-compliant. And usually it was because there was something really like tough in his heart that he needed to process and talk about and needed help with. Like the one time he was like, oh, I heard shots outside my window and it was scary and I didn't sleep. You know, like there were things to address. And man, I love this kid. Prayed every single day for Jonathan, and I still do. I had a lot of great kids. One of them, one of the other kids in my class was named Kevin. And Kevin, not his real name. Kevin was the only black kid in my class and one of the few black kids in the school. And let me tell you, Kevin could be charming. When he'd smile, oh, his eyes just sparkled. And Kevin was smart, charismatic, and, you know, just kind of fun. But Kevin also gave me attitude. Kevin also hated to do math, and sometimes just like would be like, no, I'm not doing this. I was teaching 5th grade, so I was doing all the subjects. And Kevin made me crazy. I can't tell you how many mornings I was nearly in tears because I was like, I cannot figure this kid out. I cannot figure out how to, like, crack this nut. I can't crack this case. I don't know what to do. I sent him over to the principal, a fair amount actually. And it was a hard year for me and Kevin. We really never entered into a groove. So anyways, that was my first year teaching. There are like 1,000 other stories to tell, but that's, just a little summary of my interactions with, say, 2 of my students. Okay. Now, here's where my story gets interesting. I know we are 7 minutes in. I'm going to have to speed this up. Okay. As a teacher, as an educator, I am always trying to get better, right? Some of you may have noticed in my class that when I kept a list of names and I would put a little mark by each student's name when they would volunteer or speak, I told you that was for like your participation grade, but part of that was actually to hold me accountable, because studies show when they actually have somebody sitting in a teacher's classroom that teachers tend to talk more to their higher performing students. We call on them more. The periods of time that we talk to them last longer. We stand closer to our higher achieving students, the ones that like get all straight A's. We smile at them more. Our bodies are directed towards them. There's all this stuff that teachers do, when really we should be kind of giving more attention to students who are struggling, right? Why are we heaping all of this attention on the students that are already like doing great? But we do, kind of without realizing it. And one way to kind of catch yourself in that is to literally put a little check mark every time you talk to a kid. And man, was I guilty of it. Almost all teachers are. They've studied this. And you can't deny it when somebody is sitting there putting a little check mark. Like, it's just a real thing. Okay, so I've read about things like that and tried to implement them over the years. And one of the things that I did read a lot about as well was how racial bias affects teachers. You're like, oh, this is where she's getting to it. Yeah, it is. Okay, hang in there. You pinky swore. It's kind of the same thing, right? Teachers, they found, tend to give harsher punishments to black students than white students. They tend to sort of interpret their behaviors as more defiant than the same behaviors in a white student. So, and same thing, like fewer positive interactions, fewer words of praise, all kinds of stuff, right? That, you'd say like, oh no, I treat all my students the same. And I want to, but, I don't, right? And, so I've been reading about this for years, right? And thinking like, okay, I've got to keep this in mind for the future, right? And I just recently, probably a year ago, maybe 2, I read an article about a woman who, she wrote about her experience with her first white teacher. In elementary school, she'd had mostly black instructors. And she loved school, and she had done great in it, straight A's. Her teachers kind of recognized and named some of her qualities, like that she showed leadership, she was bold, she was determined, inventive, creative, right? All of these really positive things. And she'd always done great in school. And she gets this new teacher. And right from the beginning, this teacher just doesn't really like her. The teacher says that she's loud and disruptive, stubborn, non-compliant, a troublemaker, sends her to the principal. Her grades start to suffer, because, those participation points where teachers basically can, kind of give you what they want to give you based on the effort they think you're putting in, right? Her grades started to suffer. And for some reason, when I was reading this article written by a woman, I thought, oh my God, that sounds exactly like me and Jonathan. That's exactly the way her teacher spoke about her. That's exactly the way I thought of Jonathan. And oh my God, I hurt that boy. I was a biased white teacher, and without knowing it, without intending it, I interpreted his behaviors, his actions, his words differently. Whereas, wait, did I mess up my kids? Shoot. I messed up the fake names. Okay, the black kid named Kevin, that's the one where I misinterpreted things, right? And the first kid, Jonathan, where with him I'd be so sympathetic, like, hey, let's go talk, like, you're clearly going through stuff. With Kevin, with the little black student, I would just be like, oh, okay, you want to define me? Like, well, that's not okay. You need to stop it. You need to change your behavior. Oh, you're not changing your behavior? Okay, you need to go to the principal. And it wasn't on purpose. It wasn't so blatant. I wasn't like, you're black, I'm gonna hate you. It was just this bias that had been embedded in my mind that I didn't even know was there. I had no idea I was treating him differently, but I did. I made him hate school. And this is brutal. This is really bad. This kid actually transferred schools after having me for a year, and his mom said, oh yeah, he applied for a magnet school, and he's going to this other really good school. But the truth is, I did my part. I did my part to hurt him. I was his teacher. I was a Christian teacher, praying for him every day, and I failed him. I failed him as a teacher, as a follower of Jesus. I failed him badly. I don't know the ramifications of my actions. I don't know what kind of long-lasting impact they may have caused, but I do know, like I said, that I played my part. And it does scare me to think that now this boy is not a boy anymore. He's a man. He is 22. And, when your teacher has some bias, she sends you to the principal. But what happens if somebody with a gun misinterprets what he's saying or what he's doing and kind of, for whatever reason, sees it as more aggressive, more defiant, and they hurt him, they shoot him, they kill him? It's a sombering thought that I did the same thing in my own way. Now, some of you might be saying, well, don't be so hard on yourself, Profe. You didn't mean to. But here's the thing. That's not what God says. God says your hidden faults are still sin. They're still ugly, and they need to be rooted out. And they do. And just like with any other sin, right? Like selfishness or deceit, deception, a barbed tongue that spits out cruelty. All those things are sins that it takes a while to even not just change, but even become aware of it, right? If you're someone that's really sarcastic and hurts people, it's so automatic that you don't even realize you're doing it half the time. So changing requires thought. It requires intention. It requires community, and it requires listening to other people around you. If someone says your words are sarcastic and hurtful, you can't just say, no, they're not. I mean, you listen. And that's how your eyes are opened to sins, to weaknesses you have that you're not seeing on your own. And that's the same thing with racial bias, right? And you need to listen to other people. You need your community. You need to put time and thought into it. Now, here's the other thing. In the church, we get pretty defensive when people bring up racism, bias, right? We say, I'm not that. I'm not that. But I want to point out that as Christians, we should not be surprised or offended when someone reveals to us another place where we're broken. Because dang, we already know it. We're made of flesh and bone and sin. I'm sorry, I'm doing a little... Can you keep Junie inside?
Yeah. Marion is crying. Should I just let her cry?
Yep.
Okay.
She'll fall asleep.
Junie, let's go back inside because I think your mom's...
Look at this little baby kitten.
That's a great baby chicken.
No, little baby
She's really cute.
kitten.
Kitten, right, kitten. She's super cute. I'm not getting my kids involved, but she's super cute. Okay. Right. So what was I talking about? As Christians, right. This sort of like need to prove that, like, well, I might have other problems, but I don't commit that sin, right? I don't do that. It should not be a reaction, right? Because, first of all, we know that we are pretty dang sinful. And when you look at things with clarity of eye, we're sinful just about every kind of sin, right? One way or the other, we are. Because we need Jesus, right? And that comes to the last thing. We don't need to be afraid. We don't need to be afraid to sit, to read, to think, to listen, to hear other people's voices about where we might be a little bit racist or a lot. Because as Christians, we should be prepared to shout our sin from the rooftop, to say, yeah, that is me. That is the blackness of my heart. And the reason we're not afraid of that is because we're not ultimately condemned. Christ will save us. He will wipe us clean. And admitting our weaknesses just shows him to be that much greater, right? I don't want to post for the entire world. Truly, I'm deeply heartbroken and ashamed by what I did as a person in power and authority over Kevin. But I have to. I have to tell everyone, right? I have to admit, I have to confess. And that's necessary for healing. It's necessary for repentance. And I also hope that sharing this will free you up to listen to stories with an open heart, to listen to the experiences of our Black brothers and sisters who are hurting with an open mind, and to not make defensiveness and anger your reaction. I hope that you open your heart to how maybe you are not perfect when it comes to people of other colors. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're not. Maybe you have hidden biases and hidden faults that you don't even know about. Just like we do in every other area, right? Just like selfishness. Like, sometimes you don't even realize you're selfish, but you are. And sometimes you don't even realize that you are racist. A little bit, or a lot. And you are. Just like I was. And you can hurt people with that. Anyway, this was long. This was too long. I might need, but I don't have time to edit it. Thank you for listening if you did all the way through. My other stories are a little bit shorter, and they're more confessions of me messing up and it being revealed to me by the grace of the Holy Spirit. I love you. Okay.